Fourth Adhyaya of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, translated by Max Müller. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jyoti Taravanat. First Brahmana. When Janaka Vaideha was sitting to give audience, Yagnavalkya approached, and Janaka Vaideha said, Yagnavalkya, for what object did you come, wishing for cattle or for subtle questions? Yagnavalkya replied, For both, your majesty. Let us hear what anybody may have told you. Janaka Vaideha replied, Gitvan Sailini told me that speech, Vak, is Brahman. Yagnavalkya said, As one who had the benefit of a good father, mother and teacher might tell, so did Sailini tell you that speech is Brahman. For what is the use of a dumb person? But did he tell you the body, Ayatna, and the resting place, Pratishtha, of that Brahman? Janaka Vaideha said, He did not tell me. Yagnavalkya said, Your Majesty, this Brahman stands on one leg only. Janaka Vaideha said, Then tell me, Yagnavalkya. Yagnavalkya said, The tongue is its body, ether its place, and one should worship it as knowledge. Janaka Vaideha said, What is the nature of that knowledge? Yagnavalkya replied, Your Majesty, speech itself is knowledge. For through speech, Your Majesty, a friend is known to be a friend. And likewise the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, the Adarvangi Rasas, the Itihasa, tradition, Purana Vidya, knowledge of the past, the Upanishads, Slokas, verses, Sutras, rules, Anuvakyanas and Vyakyanas, commentaries, etc., what is sacrificed, what is poured out, what is to be eaten and drunk, this world and the other world, and all creatures. By speech alone, Your Majesty, Brahman is known. Speech indeed, O King, is the highest Brahman. Speech does not desert him who worships that Brahman with such knowledge. All creatures approach him, and having become a god, he goes to the gods. Janaka Vaideha said, I shall give you for this 1,000 cows, with a bull as big as an elephant. Yagnavalkya said, My father was of opinion that one should not accept a reward without having fully instructed a people. Yagnavalkya said, Let us hear what anybody may have told you. Janaka Vaideha replied, Udanka Saulbayana told me that life, prana, is Brahman. Yagnavalkya said, As one who had the benefit of a good father, mother and teacher might tell, so did Udanka Saulbayana tell you that life is Brahman. For what is the use of a person without life? But did he tell you the body and the resting place of that Brahman? Janaka Vaideha said, He did not tell me. Yagnavalkya said, Your Majesty, this Brahman stands on one leg only. Janaka Vaideha said, Then tell me, Yagnavalkya. Yagnavalkya said, Breath is its body, ether its place, and one should worship it as what is dear. Janaka Vaideha said, What is the nature of that which is dear? Yagnavalkya replied, Your Majesty, life itself is that which is dear, because for the sake of life, Your Majesty, a man sacrifices even for him who is unworthy of sacrifice. He accepts presents from him who is not worthy to bestow presents. Nay, he goes to a country even when there is fear of being hurt for the sake of life. Life, O king, is the highest Brahman. Life does not desert him who worships that Brahman. With such knowledge, all creatures approach him, and having become a god, he goes to the gods. Janaka Vaideha said, I shall give you for this 1,000 cows with a bull as big as an elephant. Yagnavalkya said, my father was of opinion that one should not accept a reward without having fully instructed a people. Yagnavalkya said, let us hear what anybody may have told you. Janaka Vaideha replied, Barku Varshna told me that sight, Chakshus, is Brahman. Yagnavalkya said, as one who had the benefit of a good father, mother and teacher might tell, so did Barku Varshna tell you that sight is Brahman. For what is the use of a person who cannot see? But did he tell you the body and the resting place of that Brahman? Janaka Vaideha said, he did not tell me. Yagnavalkya said, your majesty, this Brahman stands on one leg only. Janaka Vaideha said, then tell me, Yagnavalkya. Yagnavalkya said, the eye is its body, ether its place, and one should worship it as what is true. Janaka Vaideha said, what is the nature of what which is true? Yagnavalkya replied, your majesty, sight itself is that which is true. For if they say to a man who sees with his eyes, didst thou see? And he says, I saw, then it is true. Sight, O king, is the highest Brahman. Sight does not desert him who worships that Brahman. With such knowledge, all creatures approach him, and having become a god, he goes to the gods. Janaka Vaideha said, I shall give you for this 1,000 cows with a bull as big as an elephant. Yagnavalkya said, my father was of the opinion that one should not accept a reward without having fully instructed a people. Yagnavalkya said, let us hear what anybody may have told you. Janaka Vaideha replied, Gardabhi Vibhita Bharadvaja told me that hearing Strotra is Brahman. Yagnavalkya said, as one who had the benefit of a good father, mother and teacher might tell, so did Gardabhi Vibhita Bharadvaja tell you that hearing is Brahman. For what is the use of a person who cannot hear? But did he tell you the body and the resting place of that Brahman? Janaka Vaideha said, he did not tell me. Yagnavalkya said, your majesty, this Brahman stands on one leg only. Janaka Vaideha said, then tell me, Yagnavalkya. Yagnavalkya said, the ear is its body, ether its place, and we should worship it as what is endless. Janaka Vaideha said, what is the nature of that which is endless? Yagnavalkya replied, your majesty, space, Disa itself, is that which is endless. And therefore to whatever space quarter he goes, he never comes to the end of it, for space is endless. Space indeed, O king, is hearing, and hearing indeed, O king, is the highest Brahman. Hearing does not desert him who worships that Brahman. With such knowledge, all creatures approach him, and having become a god, he goes to the gods. Janaka Vaideha said, I shall give you for this 1,000 cows with a bull as big as an elephant. Yagnavalkya said, my father was of opinion that one should not accept a reward without having fully instructed a people. Yagnavalkya said, let us hear what anybody may have told you. Janaka Vaideha replied, Satyakama Kabala told me that mind, Manas, is Brahman. Yagnavalkya said, As one who had the benefit of a good father, mother, and teacher might tell, so did Satyakama Gabala tell you that mind is Brahman. For what is the use of a person without mind? But did he tell you the body and the resting place of that Brahman? Janaka Vaideha said, he did not tell me. Yagnavalkya said, Your Majesty, this Brahman stands on one leg only. Janaka Vaideha said, Then tell me, Yagnavalkya. Yagnavalkya said, Mind itself is its body, ether its place, and we should worship it as bliss. Janaka Vaideha said, What is the nature of bliss? Yagnavalkya replied, Your Majesty, mind itself, for with the mind does a man desire a woman, and a like son is born of her, and he is bliss. Mind indeed, O King, is the highest Brahman. Mind does not desert him who worships that Brahman. With such knowledge, all creatures approach him, and having become a god, he goes to the gods. Janaka Vaideha said, I shall give you for this 1,000 cows, with a bull as big as an elephant. Yagnavalkya said, My father was of opinion that one should not accept a reward without having fully instructed a people. Yagnavalkya said, Let us hear what anybody may have told you. Janaka Vaideha replied, Vidagdasa Kalya told me that the heart, Hridaya, is Brahman. Yagnavalkya said, As one who had the benefit of a good father, mother, and teacher might tell, so did Vidagdasa Kalya tell you that the heart is Brahman. For what is the use of a person without a heart? But did he tell you the body and the resting place of that Brahman? Janaka Vaideha said, He did not tell me. Yagnavalkya said, Your Majesty, this Brahman stands on one leg only. Janaka Vaideha said, Then tell me, Yagnavalkya. Yagnavalkya said, The heart itself is its body, ether its place, and we should worship it as certainty, sthiti. Janaka Vaideha said, What is the nature of certainty? Yagnavalkya replied, Your Majesty, the heart itself. For the heart indeed, O King, is the body of all things. The heart is the resting place of all things. For in the heart, O King, all things rest. The heart indeed, O King, is the highest Brahman. The heart does not desert him who worships that Brahman. With such knowledge, all creatures approach him, and having become a god, he goes to the gods. Janaka Vaideha said, I shall give you for this 1,000 cows, and a bull as big as an elephant. Yagnavalkya said, My father was of opinion that one should not accept a reward without having fully instructed a people. Second Brahmana. Janaka Vaideha, descending from his throne, said, I bow to you, O Yagnavalkya, teach me. Yagnavalkya said, Your Majesty, as a man who wishes to make a long journey would furnish himself with a chariot or a ship, thus is your mind well furnished by these Upanishads. You are honorable and wealthy. You have learnt the Vedas and been told the Upanishads. Whither then will you go when departing hence? Janaka Vaideha said, Sir, I do not know whither I shall go. Yagnavalkya said, Then I shall tell you this, whither you will go. Janaka Vaideha said, Tell it, sir. Yagnavalkya said, That person who is in the right eye, he is called Indra. And him who is Indra, they call indeed Indra mysteriously, for the gods love what is mysterious and dislike what is evident. Now that which in the shape of a person is in the right eye is his wife Viraj. Their meeting place is the ether within the heart, and their food the red lump within the heart. Again, Their covering is that which is like a network within the heart, and the road on which they move from sleep to waking is the artery that rises upwards from the heart. Like a hair divided into 1,000 parts, so are the veins of it which are called Hita placed firmly within the heart. Through these indeed that food flows on flowing, and he, the Taijasa, receives as it were purer food than the corporal self, the Visvanara. His, the Taijasa's eastern quarter, are the pranas, breath, which go to the east. His southern quarter are the prana which go to the south. His western quarter are the pranas which go to the west. His northern quarter are the pranas which go to the north. His upper zenith quarter are the pranas which go upward. His lower nadir quarter are the pranas which go downward. All the quarters are all the pranas, and he, the Atman in that space, can only be described by no. He is incomprehensible, for he cannot be comprehended. He is undecaying, for he cannot decay. He is not attached, for he does not attach himself. He is unbound, he does not suffer, he does not perish. O Janaka, you have indeed reached fearlessness. Thus said Yagnavalkya. Then Janaka said, may that fearlessness come to you also, who teachest us fearlessness. I bow to you. Here are the Videhas, and here am I, thy slave. Third Brahmana. Yagnavalkya came to Janaka Vaideha, and he did not mean to speak to him. But when formerly Janaka Vaideha and Yagnavalkya had a disputation on the Agnihotra, Yagnavalkya had granted him a boon, and he chose for a boon that he might be free to ask him any question he liked. Yagnavalkya granted it, and thus the king was the first to ask him a question. Yagnavalkya, he said, what is the light of man? Yagnavalkya replied, the sun, O king. For having the sun alone for his light, man sits, moves about, does his work, and returns. Janaka Vaideha said, so indeed it is, O Yagnavalkya. Janaka Vaideha said, when the sun has set, O Yagnavalkya, what is then the light of man? Yagnavalkya replied, the moon indeed is his light. For having the moon alone for his light, man sits, moves about, does his work, and returns. Janaka Vaideha said, so indeed it is, O Yagnavalkya. Janaka Vaideha said, when the sun has set, O Yagnavalkya, and the moon has set, what is the light of man? Yagnavalkya replied, fire indeed is his light. For having fire alone for his light, man sits, moves about, does his work, and returns. Janaka Vaideha said, when the sun has set, O Yagnavalkya, and the moon has set, and the fire is gone out, what is then the light of man? Yagnavalkya replied, sound indeed is his light. For having sound alone for his light, man sits, moves about, does his work, and returns. Therefore, O king, when one cannot see even one's own hand, yet when a sound is raised, one goes towards it. Janaka Vaideha said, so indeed it is, O Yagnavalkya. Janaka Vaideha said, when the sun has set, O Yagnavalkya, and the moon has set, and the fire is gone out, and the sound hushed, what is then the light of man? Yagnavalkya said, the Self indeed is his light. For having the Self alone as his light, man sits, moves about, does his work and returns. Janaka Vaideha said, "Who is that Self?" Yagnavalkya replied, "He who is within the heart, surrounded by the pranas, senses, the person of light, consisting of knowledge. He, remaining the same, wanders along the two worlds, as if thinking, as if moving. During sleep, in dream, he transcends this world and all the forms of death, all that falls under the sway of death, all that is perishable. On being born, that person, assuming his body, becomes united with all evils. When he departs and dies, he leaves all evils behind. And there are two states for that person, the one here in this world, the other in the other world, and as a third, an intermediate state, the state of sleep. When in that intermediate state he sees both those states together, the one here in this world and the other in the other world. Now, whatever his admission to the other world may be, having gained that admission, he sees both the evils and the blessings. And when he falls asleep, then after having taken away with him the material from the whole world, destroying and building it up again, he sleeps, dreams by his own light. In that state, the person is self-illuminated. There are no real chariots in that state, no horses, no roads, but he himself sends forth, creates chariots, horses, and roads. There are no blessings there, no happiness, no joys, but he himself sends forth, creates blessings, happiness, and joys. There are no tanks there, no lakes, no rivers, but he himself sends forth, creates tanks, lakes, and rivers. He indeed is the maker. On this there are these verses. After having subdued by sleep all that belongs to the body, he, not asleep himself, looks down upon the sleeping senses. Having assumed light, he goes again to his place, the golden person, the lonely bird. Guarding with the breath, prana, life, the lower nest, the immortal moves away from the nest. That immortal one goes wherever he likes, the golden person, the lonely bird. Going up and down in his dream, the god makes manifold shapes for himself, either rejoicing together with women, or laughing with friends, or seeing terrible sights. People may see his playground, but himself no one ever sees. Therefore they say, let no one wake a man suddenly, for it is not easy to remedy if he does not get back rightly to his body. Here some people object and say, no, this sleep is the same as the place of waking. For what he sees while awake, that only he sees when asleep. No, here in sleep the person is self-illuminated, as we explained before. Janaka Vaideha said, I give you, sir, 1,000. Speak on for the sake of my emancipation. Yagnavalkya said, that person, having enjoyed himself in that state of bliss, samprasada, deep sleep, having moved about and seen both good and evil, hastens back again as he came to the place from which he started, the place of sleep, to dream. And whatever he may have seen there, he is not followed, affected by it, for that person is not attached to anything. Janaka Vaideha said, "So it is indeed, Yagnavalkya. I give you, sir, 1,000. Speak on for the sake of emancipation." Yagnavalkya said, "That person, having enjoyed himself in that sleep dream, having moved about and seen both good and evil, hastens back again as he came to the place from which he started, to be awake. And whatever he may have seen there, he is not followed, affected by it, for that person is not attached to anything." Janaka Vaideha said, "So it is indeed, Yagnavalkya. I give you, sir, 1,000. Speak on for the sake of emancipation." Yagnavalkya said, "That person, having enjoyed himself in that state of waking, having moved about and seen both good and evil, hastens back again as he came to the place from which he started, to the state of sleeping dream. In fact, as a large fish moves along the two banks of a river, the right and the left, so does that person move along these two states, the state of sleeping and the state of waking. And as a falcon or any other swift bird, after he has roamed about here in the air, becomes tired, and folding his wings is carried to his nest, so does that person hasten to that state where, when asleep, he desires no more desires, and dreams no more dreams. There are in his body the veins called Hita, which are as small as a hair divided 1,000-fold, full of white, blue, yellow, green, and red. Now when, as it were, they kill him, when, as it were, they overcome him, when, as it were, an elephant chases him, when, as it were, he falls into a well, he fancies through ignorance that danger which he commonly sees in waking. But when he fancies that he is, as it were, a god, or that he is, as it were, a king, or I am this altogether, that is his highest world. This indeed is his true form, free from desires, free from evil, free from fear. Now, as a man, when embraced by a beloved wife, knows nothing that is without, nothing that is within, thus this person, when embraced by the intelligent Prajna, self, knows nothing that is without, nothing that is within. This indeed is his true form, in which his wishes are fulfilled, in which the self only is his wish, in which no wish is left, free from any sorrow. Then a father is not a father, a mother not a mother, the worlds not worlds, the gods not gods, the Vedas not Vedas. Then a thief is not a thief, a murderer not a murderer, a Chandala not a Chandala, a Pulkasa not a Pulkasa, a Sramana not a Sramana, a Tapasa not a Tapasa. He is not followed by good, not followed by evil, for he has then overcome all the sorrows of the heart. And when it is said that there in the Sushpati he does not see, yet he is seeing, though he does not see. For sight is inseparable from the seer, because it cannot perish. But there is then no second, nothing else different from him that he could see. And when it is said that there in the Sushpati he does not smell, yet he is smelling, though he does not smell. For smelling is inseparable from the smeller, because it cannot perish. But there is no second, nothing else different from him that he could smell. And when it is said that there in the Sushpati he does not taste, yet he is tasting, though he does not taste. For tasting is inseparable from the taster, because it cannot perish. But there is then no second, nothing else different from him that he could taste. And when it is said that there in the Sushpati he does not speak, yet he is speaking, though he does not speak. For speaking is inseparable from the speaker, because it cannot perish. But there is then no second, nothing else different from him that he could speak. And when it is said that there in the Sushpati he does not hear, yet he is hearing, though he does not hear. For hearing is inseparable from the hearer, because it cannot perish. But there is then no second, nothing else different from him that he could hear. And when it is said that there in the Sushpati he does not think, yet he is thinking, though he does not think. For thinking is inseparable from the thinker, because it cannot perish. But there is then no second, nothing else different from him that he could think. And when it is said that there in the Sushpati he does not touch, yet he is touching, though he does not touch. For touching is inseparable from the toucher, because it cannot perish. But there is then no second, nothing else different from him that he could think. And then it is said that there in the Sushpati he does not know, yet he is knowing, though he does not know. For knowing is inseparable from the knower, because it cannot perish. But there is then no second, nothing else different from him that he could know. When in the waking and dreaming there is as it were another, then can one see the other, then can one smell the other, then one can speak to the other, then can one hear the other, then can one think the other, then one can touch the other, then one can know the other. An ocean is that one seer without any duality. This is the Brahma world, O king. Thus did Yajnavalkya teach him. This is his highest goal. This is his highest success. This is his highest world. This is his highest bliss. All other creatures live on a small portion of that bliss. If a man is healthy, wealthy, and lord of others, surrounded by all human enjoyments, that is the highest blessing of men. Now 100 of these human blessings make one blessing of the fathers who have conquered the world of the fathers. 100 blessings of the fathers who have conquered this world make one blessing of the Gandharva world. 100 blessings in the Gandharva world make one blessing of the Devas by merit, work, sacrifice, who obtain their Godhead by merit. 100 blessings of the Devas by merit make one blessing of the Devas by birth, also of a Strotya, who is without sin and not overcome by desire. 100 blessings of the Devas by birth make one blessing in the world of Prajapati, also of Srotya, who is without sin and not overcome by desire. 100 blessings in the world of Prajapati make one blessing in the world of Brahman, also of a Srotya, who is without sin and not overcome by desire. And this is the highest blessing. This is the Brahma world, O king. Thus spake Yajnavalkya. Janaka Vaideha said, I give you, sir, 1,000. Speak on for the sake of my emancipation. Then Yajnavalkya was afraid lest the king, having become full of understanding, should drive him from all his positions. And Yajnavalkya said, That person, having enjoyed himself in that state of sleeping dream, having moved about and seen both good and bad, hastens back again as he came to the place from which he started, to the state of waking. And as policemen, magistrates, equerries, and governors wait for a king who is coming back with food and drink, saying, "He comes back, he approaches," thus do all the elements wait on him who knows this, saying, "That Brahman comes, that Brahman approaches." And as policemen, magistrates, equerries, and governors gather round a king who is departing, thus do all the senses, pranas, gather round the self at the time of death, when a man is thus going to expire. Fourth Brahmana. Yajnavalkya continued, "Now when that self, having sunk into weakness, sinks as it were into unconsciousness, then gather those senses, pranas, around him, and he, taking with him those elements of light, descends into the heart. When that person in the eye turns away, then he ceases to know any forms. He has become one, they say, he does not see. He has become one, they say, he does not smell. He has become one, they say, he does not taste. He has become one, they say, he does not speak. He has become one, they say, he does not hear. He has become one, they say, he does not think. He has become one, they say, he does not touch. He has become one, they say, he does not know. The point of his heart becomes lighted up, and by that light the self departs, either through the eye, or through the skull, or through other places in the body. And when he thus departs, life, the chief prana, departs after him. And when life thus departs, all the other vital spirits, pranas, depart after it. He is conscious, and being conscious, he follows and departs. Then both his knowledge and his work take hold of him, and his acquaintance with former things. And as a caterpillar, after having reached the end of a blade of grass, and after having made another approach to another blade, draws itself together towards it, thus does this self, after having thrown off this body and dispelled all ignorance, and after making another approach to another body, draw himself together towards it. And as a goldsmith, taking a piece of gold, turns it into another, newer and more beautiful shape, so does this self, after having thrown off this body and dispelled all ignorance, make unto himself another, newer and more beautiful shape, whether it be like the fathers, or like the Gandharvas, or like the Devas, or like Prajapati, or like Brahman, or like other beings. That self is indeed Brahman, consisting of knowledge, mind, life, sight, hearing, earth, water, wind, ether, light and no light, desire and no desire, anger and no anger, right or wrong, and all things. Now as a man is like this or like that, according as he acts and according as he behaves, so will he be. A man of good acts will become good, a man of bad acts bad. He becomes pure by pure deeds, bad by bad deeds. And here they say that a person consists of desires, and as is his desire, so is his will, and as is his will, so is his deed, and whatever deed he does, that he will reap. And here there is this verse: to whatever object a man's own mind is attracted, to that he goes strenuously together with his deed. And having obtained the end, the last results of whatever deed he does here on earth, he returns again from that world, which is the temporary reward of his deed, to this world of action. So much for the man who desires. But as to the man who does not desire, who, not desiring, freed from desires, is satisfied in his desires, or desires the self only, his vital spirits do not depart elsewhere. Being Brahman, he goes to Brahman. On this there is this verse: when all desires which once entered his heart are undone, then does the mortal become immortal. Then he obtains Brahman. And as the slough of a snake lies on an anthill, dead and cast away, thus lies this body, but that disembodied immortal spirit, prana, life, is Brahman only, is only light. Janaka Vaideha said, "Sir, I give you 1,000. On this there are these verses: the small old path stretching far away has been found by me. On it sages who know Brahman move on to the Svargaloka, heaven, and thence higher on as entirely free. On that path they say that there is white or blue or yellow or green or red. That path was found by Brahman, and on it goes whoever knows Brahman, and who has done good and obtained splendor. All who worship what is not knowledge, avidya, enters into blind darkness. Those who delight in knowledge enter, as it were, into greater darkness. There are indeed those unblessed worlds covered with blind darkness. Men who are ignorant and not enlightened go after death to those worlds. If a man understands the self, saying, 'I am he,' what could he wish or desire that he should pine after the body? Whoever has found and understood the self that has entered into this patched together hiding place, he indeed is the creator, for he is the maker of everything. His is the world, and he is the world itself. While we are here, we may know this. If not, I am ignorant, and there is great destruction. Those who know it become immortal, but others suffer pain indeed. If a man clearly beholds the self as God, and as the Lord of all that is and will be, then he is no more afraid. He behind whom the year revolves with the days, him the gods worship as the light of lights, as immortal time. He in whom the five beings and the ether rest, him alone I believe to be the self. I who know believe him to be Brahman. I who am immortal believe him to be immortal. They who know the life of life, the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, they have comprehended the ancient primeval Brahman. By the mind alone it is to be perceived. There is in it no diversity. He who perceives therein any diversity goes from death to death. This eternal being that can never be proved is to be perceived in one way only. It is spotless, beyond the ether, the unborn self, great and eternal. Let a wise Brahmana, after he has discovered him, practice wisdom. Let him not seek after many words, for that is mere weariness of the tongue. And he is that great unborn self, who consists of knowledge, is surrounded by the pranas, the ether within the heart. In it there reposes the ruler of all, the lord of all, the king of all. He does not become greater by good works, nor smaller by evil works. He is the lord of all, the king of all things, the protector of all things. He is a bank and a boundary, so that these worlds may not be confounded. Brahmanas seek to know him by the study of the Veda, by sacrifice, by gifts, by penance, by fasting, and he who knows him becomes a Muni. Wishing for that world for Brahman only, mendicants leave their homes. Knowing this, the people of old did not wish for offspring. "What shall we do with offspring?" they said, "we who have this self and this world of Brahman." And they, having risen above the desire for sons, wealth, the new worlds, wander about as mendicants. For desire for sons is desire for wealth, and desire for wealth is desire for worlds. Both these are indeed desires only. He, the self, is to be described by no, he is incomprehensible, for he cannot be comprehended. He is imperishable, for he cannot perish. He is unattached, for he does not attach himself. Unfettered, he does not suffer, he does not fail. Him who knows these two do not overcome, whether he says that for some reason he has done evil, or for some reason he has done good. He overcomes both, and neither what he has done nor what he has omitted to do burns or affects him. This has been told by a verse, Rik. This eternal greatness of the Brahmana does not grow larger by work, nor does it grow smaller. Let man try to find, its trace, for having found, known it, he is not sullied by any evil deed. He therefore that knows it, after having become quiet, subdued, satisfied, patient and collected, sees self in self, sees all as self. Evil does not overcome him. He overcomes all evil. Evil does not burn him. He burns all evil. Free from evil, free from spots, free from doubt, he becomes a true Brahmana. This is the Brahma world, O King. Thus spoke Yajnavalkya. Janaka Vaideha said, Sir, I give you the Vaidehas and also myself to be together your slaves. This indeed is the great, the unborn self, the strong, the giver of wealth. He who knows this obtains wealth. This great unborn self, undecaying, undying, immortal, fearless, is indeed Brahman. Fearless is Brahman, and he who knows this becomes verily the fearless Brahman. Fifth Brahmana. Yagnavalkya had two wives, Maitreyi and Katyayani. Of these, Maitreyi was conversant with Brahman, but Katyayani possessed such knowledge only as women possess. And Yagnavalkya, when he wished to get ready for another state of life, when he wished to give up the state of a householder and retire into the forest, said, Maitreyi, verily I am going away from this my house into the forest. Forsooth, let me make a settlement between thee and that Katyayani. Maitreyi said, My lord, if this whole earth full of wealth belonged to me, tell me, should I be immortal by it, or no? No, replied Yagnavalkya, like the life of rich people will be thy life, but there is no hope of immortality by wealth. And Maitreyi said, What should I do with that by which I do not become immortal? What my Lord knoweth of immortality, tell that clearly to me. Yagnavalkya replied, Thou who art truly dear to me, thou hast increased what is dear to me in thee. Therefore, if you like, lady, I will explain it to thee, and mark well what I say. And he said, Verily, a husband is not dear, that you may love the husband, but that you may love the self, therefore a husband is dear. Verily, a wife is not dear, that you may love the wife, but that you may love the self, therefore a wife is dear. Verily, sons are not dear, that you may love the sons, but that you may love the self, therefore sons are dear. Verily, wealth is not dear, that you may love wealth, but that you may love the self, therefore wealth is dear. Verily, cattle are not dear, that you may love cattle, but that you may love the self, therefore cattle are dear. Verily, the Brahman class is not dear, that you may love the Brahman class, but that you may love the self, therefore the Brahman class is dear. Verily, the Kshatriya class is not dear, that you may love the Kshatriya class, but that you may love the self, therefore the Kshatriya class is dear. Verily, the worlds are not dear, that you may love the worlds, but that you may love the self, therefore the worlds are dear. Verily, the Devas are not dear, that you may love the Devas, but that you may love the self, therefore the Devas are dear. Verily, the Vedas are not dear, that you may love the Vedas, but that you may love the self, therefore the Vedas are dear. Verily, creatures are not dear, that you may love the creatures, but that you may love the self, therefore are creatures dear. Verily, everything is not dear, that you may love everything, but that you may love the self, therefore everything is dear. Verily, the self is to be seen, to be heard, to be perceived, to be marked, O Maitreyi. When the self has been seen, heard, perceived and known, then all this is known. Whosoever looks for the Brahman class elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by the Brahman class. Whosoever looks for the Kshatriya class elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by the Kshatriya class. Whosoever looks for the worlds elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by the worlds. Whosoever looks for the Devas elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by the Devas. Whosoever looks for the Vedas elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by the Vedas. Whosoever looks for the creatures elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by the creatures. Whosoever looks for anything elsewhere than in the self was abandoned by anything. This Brahman class, this Kshatriya class, these worlds, these Devas, these Vedas, all these things, this everything, all is that self. Now, as the sounds of a drum, when beaten, cannot be seized externally by themselves, but the sound is seized when the drum is seized, or the beater of the drum. And as the sounds of a conch shell, when blown, cannot be seized externally by themselves, but the sound is seized when the shell is seized, or the blower of the shell. And as the sounds of a lute, when played, cannot be seized externally by themselves, but the sound is seized when the lute is seized, or the player of the lute. As clouds of smoke proceed by themselves out of lighted fire kindled with damp fuel, thus verily, O Maitreyi, has been breathed forth from this great being what we have as Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharvangiri Rasas, Itihasa, Purana, Vidya, the Upanishads, Slokas, Sutras, Anuvakyanas, Vakyanas, what is sacrificed, what is poured out, food, drink, this world and the other world, and all creatures. From him alone all these were breathed forth. As all waters find their center in the sea, all touches in the skin, all tastes in the tongue, all smells in the nose, all colors in the eye, all sounds in the ear, all percepts in the mind, all knowledge in the heart, all actions in the hands, all movements in the feet, and all the Vedas in speech. As a mass of salt has neither inside nor outside, but is altogether a mass of taste, thus indeed has that self neither inside nor outside, but is altogether a mass of knowledge, and having risen from out these elements, vanishes again in them. When he has departed, there is no more knowledge. Name, I say, O Maitreyi. Thus spoke Yajnavalkya. Then Maitreyi said, Here, sir, thou hast landed me in utter bewilderment. Indeed, I do not understand him. But he replied, O Maitreyi, I say nothing that is bewildering. Verily, beloved, that self is imperishable, and of an indestructible nature. For when there is as it were duality, then one sees the other, one smells the other, one tastes the other, one salutes the other, one hears the other, one perceives the other, one touches the other, one knows the other. But when the self only is all this, should he salute another? How should he hear another? How should he touch another? How should he know another? How should he know him? By whom? He knows all this. That self is to be described by? No, no. He is incomprehensible, for he cannot be comprehended. He is imperishable, for he cannot perish. He is unattached, for he does not attach himself. Unfettered, he does not suffer, he does not fail. How, O beloved, should he know the knower? Thus, O Maitreyi, thou hast been instructed. Thus far goes immortality. Having said so, Yajnavalkya went away into the forest. Sixth Brahmana. Now follows the stem. We from Pautimashya, Pautimashya from Gavupavana, Gavupavana from Pautimashya, Pautimashya from Gavupavana, Gavupavana from Kaushika, Kaushika from Kaundinya, Kaundinya from Sandilya, Sandilya from Kaushika and Gautama, Gautama from Agniveshya, Agniveshya from Gargaya, Gargaya from Gargaya, Gargaya from Gautama, Gautama from Saitava, Saitava from Parasarayana, Parasarayana from Gargayayana, Gargayayana from Udalakayana, Udalakayana from Gabalayana, Gabalayana from Madhyandinayana, Madhyandinayana from Saukarayana, Saukarayana from Kashayana, Kashayana from Sayakayana, Sayakayana from Kaushikayani, Kaushikayani from Grita Kaushika, Grita Kaushika from Parasarayana, Parasarayana from Parasaraya, Parasaraya from Gautakrayana, Gautakrayana from Asurayana and Yaksha, Asurayana from Travani, Travani from Anupajandani, Anupajandani from Asuri, Asuri from Bharadvaja, Bharadvaja from Aitreya, Aitreya from Manti, Manti from Gautama, Gautama from Gautama, Gautama from Vatsaya, Vatsaya from Sandilya, Sandilya from Kaisorya Kapya, Kaisora Kapya from Kumaraharita, Kumaraharita from Galava, Galava from Vidarbhi Kaundina, Vidarbhi Kaundinya from Vatsanapath Bhabrava, Vatsanapath Bhabrava from Pati Saubhra, Pati Saubhra from Ayasa Angirasa, Ayasa Angirasa from Abhuti Tavashtra, Abhuti Tavashtra from Visvarupa Tavashtra, Visvarupa Tavashtra from Asvinu, Asvinu from Dadhayak Atharvana, Dadhayak Atharvana from Atharvan Daiva, Atharvan Daiva from Mrityu Pradvamsana, Mrityu Pradvamsana from Pradvamsana, Pradvamsana from Ekarshi, Ekarshi from Viprakiti, Viprakiti from Vyashti, Vyashti from Sanaru, Sanaru from Sanantana, Sanantana from Sanaga, Sanaga from Parameshtin, Parameshtin from Brahman. Brahman is Swayambhu, self-existent, adoration to Brahman. End of 4th Adhyaya. Recording by Jyoti Taravanat.